You're standing on a foggy field at dawn. Your opponent is 15 feet away. The signal is given, and you reach for your weapon. The sword you're holding right now could be the reason you walk home, or the reason you don't. Not all dueling swords were created equal. Some were elegant killing machines, fast, precise, deadly in the right hands. Others were clunky, impractical, or just flat-out dangerous to their own users. Today, we're ranking every major dueling sword from worst to best, judged on 4 criteria: lethality, speed, ease of use, and real-world dueling performance. Not movie performance, not fantasy. Actual historical combat. There are some controversial picks on this list. Stay to the end, because the #1 spot is going to surprise you. Before we get into the rankings, let's be clear about what we mean by dueling sword. We're talking about blades designed primarily for one-on-one personal combat, not battlefield weapons, not ceremonial pieces. Actual dueling implements. Our 4 scoring categories: lethality, how quickly and reliably can it end a fight? Speed, how fast can it be deployed, maneuvered, and recovered? Ease of use, how steep is the learning curve? And real-world record, how did it actually perform in documented duels? Let's start at the bottom. Coming in last place, the backsword. The backsword is a single-edged blade that saw widespread use in 17th century Europe, particularly in military contexts. So why is it last on a dueling list? Because it was never really a duelist's weapon. It was a soldier's weapon. It was heavy, awkward for the tight, precise footwork that formal dueling demanded, and the single-edged design limited its versatility in a one-on-one exchange. In the Scottish Highlands, it had its devotees, and in the hands of a trained cavalry officer, it was brutal. But put it against a trained swordsman with a nimbler blade, and it loses almost every time. Great for a battlefield, poor for a duel. That distinction matters. #7, the saber. Now, before the fencing community comes for me, yes, the saber produced champions. Yes, it's still an Olympic discipline, but we're ranking historical dueling performance, not sport fencing. The cavalry saber's curved blade was optimized for slashing from horseback. On foot, in a formal civilian duel, that curve becomes a liability. It compromises the precision of a thrust, and in most European dueling traditions from the 17th century onward, the thrust was king. That said, the saber earns points for speed. It is fast, and for its cutting ability, which could end a fight quickly if the opponent's guard broke down. Military officers who dueled with it were often lethal, but the technique is demanding, and the weapon punishes the untrained far more than it rewards them. Deadly in expert hands, unreliable in average ones. #6, the small sword. Now we're getting into the heart of dueling culture. The small sword dominated European civilian dueling from roughly 1650 to 1800. It was the gentleman's weapon, light, elegant, worn as everyday fashion. And here's the thing, it killed an enormous number of people. Its narrow, stiff blade was designed almost exclusively for thrusting. No real cutting edge, just penetration. At close range, against an unarmored opponent in shirt sleeves, a small sword thrust to the torso or throat was often instantly fatal. So why is it only #6? Because it had almost no stopping power against a committed attacker. A man could be run through with a small sword and still complete his attack before collapsing. There are documented cases of both duelists killing each other simultaneously. It also required years of refined training. In the hands of a novice, it was nearly useless. Beautiful, deadly, and historically significant, but too fragile and too specialized to rank higher. #5, the broadsword. Don't confuse this with the two-handed claymore. The broadsword we're talking about is the one-handed, basket-hilted blade popularized in the Scottish Highlands and dueling circles of the 18th century. This is where things get interesting. The broadsword was a complete weapon. It could cut, it could thrust, and its basket hilt provided hand protection that most other dueling swords simply didn't have. Scottish military officers trained in broadsword technique were among the most feared single combatants in Europe. The Highland style, aggressive, physically dominant, using the offhand as a complement, was a system designed to destroy the refined smallsword fencer. Its weakness? Weight and reach. Against a trained rapier or a paid duelist with superior range, the broadsword user had to close distance fast, and if they misjudged it, they paid dearly. Underrated. Arguably the most complete dueling package on this list below the top 4. Number 4. The rapier. The rapier is in many people's minds the dueling sword, and it deserves that reputation. From roughly 1550 to 1700, the rapier dominated civilian dueling across Europe. Long, slender, with a complex swept or cup hilt, it was a precision instrument, part sword, part science experiment. Masters like George Silver and Salvator Fabris built entire philosophical systems around it. Spanish, Italian, and German schools all developed competing theories of the rapier, and the arguments got so intense that fencing masters sometimes killed each other to prove a point. What made it special? Reach. A rapier gave its user more distance than almost any other one-handed sword. Combined with sophisticated footwork and a point-forward guard, it turned every duel into a geometry problem. But here's why it's not higher. The rapier was slow to recover compared to lighter blades. A thrust that missed left you extended and vulnerable. And it was brutally demanding to master. A poorly trained rapier user was worse off than someone with a simple knife. The signature dueling sword of the Renaissance. Brilliant in theory, punishing in practice. Number 3. The main gauche, specifically as a rapier's companion. Hear me out. I'm cheating slightly by including a dagger, but in the context of dueling, the rapier and dagger combination was so dominant for nearly a century that ignoring it would be dishonest. The main gauche was a long, parrying dagger held in the left hand. Together with the rapier, it created a two-weapon system that addressed almost every weakness of a single blade. The dagger caught and deflected incoming thrusts. It provided a backup weapon if the rapier was entangled, and it could deliver finishing blows at close range when a full sword wasn't practical. Dueling masters of the 16th and 17th centuries considered this combination nearly unbeatable against a single weapon. It eventually fell out of fashion as dueling formalized into single-weapon affairs. But in its heyday, the paired combination was the gold standard of personal combat. The most complete system on this list. If we're talking pure effectiveness, nothing below number 1 was more dangerous. Number 2. The Schlager. Most people have never heard of this one, and that's a crime. The Schlager is a long, stiff-bladed sword developed specifically for the German student dueling tradition, known as Mensur, which was practiced in German, Austrian, and Swiss universities from the 18th century well into the 20th. It's still practiced today in some European fraternities. What makes it extraordinary? The rules around it forced the development of an almost supernatural level of precision. In Mensur dueling, you stood at fixed distance, no footwork allowed, and traded cuts to the head and face while wearing arm, eye, and throat protection. You could not dodge. You could not retreat. You could only parry or absorb. The result was a fencing system built entirely around lightning-fast, mechanically perfect blade technique. Schlager duelists developed what historians describe as some of the most technically refined cutting mechanics in all of sword history. The scar left by a Mensur cut, called a Schmiss, was historically worn as a badge of honor among German elites. Bismarck had one, So did a young Helmuth von Moltke, technically the most refined dueling instrument ever designed for its specific purpose. The training system it produced was arguably unmatched in precision. And the #1 dueling sword of all time, the épée de combat. By the mid-1800s, European dueling had evolved into something more refined and more lethal than the grand rapier duels of the Renaissance. The weapon that emerged to dominate this era was the épée de combat, a stiff, triangular-sectioned thrusting sword with a large handguard, typically between 85 and 90 centimeters long. This is not the fencing épée of the Olympics. This is its deadly ancestor. Here's why it wins. 1. It was purpose-built for exactly one thing. The épée de combat wasn't a battlefield weapon, wasn't a fashion accessory, wasn't a cavalry tool. It was engineered from the ground up to kill a man in a duel. Every design element, the rigid blade, the deep guard, the balance point, was optimized for one-on-one mortal combat. 2. It produced the most sophisticated dueling system in history. The French and Belgian schools of the 19th century elevated the épée into an art form. Masters like Camille Prévost and Louis Rondel developed techniques of extraordinary subtlety. Feints within feints, second intention attacks, psychological manipulation built into the physical structure of the blade work. 3. Its real-world record is impeccable. In the hundreds of documented French duels of the 1800s, where death was not always the goal but injury was common, the épée de combat was statistically the most frequently used and most consistently lethal single-weapon choice. 4. The learning curve rewarded investment. Unlike the rapier, which almost required a lifetime of study to master, the épée de combat had a technical floor accessible to moderately trained gentlemen, yet a ceiling that professional masters spent entire careers exploring. It was deadly at every level of proficiency, the pinnacle of dueling weapon design, fast, precise, lethal, and backed by the deepest technical tradition of any sword on this list. So there's the full ranking. 8, the backsword. 7, the saber. 6, the small sword. 5, the broadsword. 4, the rapier. 3, the main gauche and rapier combination. 2, the Schlager. And number 1, the épée de combat. Now, do I expect you to agree with all of this? Absolutely not. The rapier community alone is going to have words for me in the comments. And honestly, I want to hear it. Tell me which sword you'd choose. Tell me where I got it wrong. And if you want to see a deep dive into any one of these weapons, the dueling history, the technique, the famous fights, drop it in the comments, and we'll make that video. If you found this useful, hit subscribe. New videos on historical combat, weapons, and military history every week. I'll see you in the next one.